I can't get it to stand. Because the thing is gone. Okay. It's gonna be like crooked. Huh? Oh, I guess. Yeah, that would work.
recognized by everybody in the world. Let's pray that they will come to know you more and more this time, that this time will be helpful for us, and that they would grow in you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So what's your name?
Diego.
Diego. I'm Joel, and I'm kind of like the youth pastor or English ministry pastor here. So nice to meet you. So just for the announcements, nothing new. So YA is going to be next week. So Pastor Charles will be here next week. But today we're still doing Bible study. And just a combined service with the Korean ministry on September 23rd. So today we're going to be reading from John chapter 8, verses 31 to 36. So I'll read the first verse, and then you guys can read the next verse, and so on. It says, so Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples.
You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
They answered him, we are offspring of Abraham, and have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say, you will become free?
Jesus answered them, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin.
The slave does not remain in the house forever. The son remains in the house forever.
So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed.
Amen. So, in our Christian lives, there's this kind of thing that everybody has to deal with. So, when I was growing up and just in my youth group, just as I was growing up, what happened is that a lot of them actually, now they don't go to church. And now they're not really sure if they're Christian. Some of them aren't even sure if they believe that there is a God. So, and I'm still friends with them, I still meet up with them and stuff. But then, how they see it, and one of the things that they always kind of disliked about the church, disliked about being a Christian, is that it seemed like they were trapped. It seemed like being Christian stopped them from doing so many things. Like, if I'm Christian, I can't do this, I can't do that. And so now they just live their lives, and now they just do whatever they want. It's not as if they live like hedonists or something, like they don't just go out, I don't know, have sex with everyone, have drunken parties, and then just do all this crazy stuff. But then they drink when they want. If they don't want to go to church, they don't go to church. They say what they want to the people. They just say what they want to people. So in this kind of life, in this kind of way of living, it seems like this is freedom. It seems like now that I'm no longer going to church, now that I'm no longer, I guess, my pastor's not bugging me anymore, my friends aren't bugging me anymore, now it seems like I'm truly free. I can do what I want. So it's like, this is kind of the mindset that a lot of people have. This is how a lot of people think. They think that being a Christian means that, in a way, you're enslaving yourself to Christ. They think that being Christian, in a way, means that I can't do the things that I want to do. I'm not free anymore. And this is what they think. And this is how the Jews in this passage were thinking. Because the thing about the Jews is that they're very proud of their heritage. And so they say, we are the offspring of Abraham. Abraham is our father. So he wasn't anybody's slave. So how can you say we are slaves? Because we aren't. So this is how they were thinking, like, I'm not enslaved to anything, I'm free. But then what Christ tells them, what Jesus tells them, is that if you practice sin, you are a slave to sin. And so we usually think the opposite, right? It's like, I'm free to sin. That's how people usually think. Like, I'm free to drink now. Because that becomes a big part of life when you get older, when you get to like 21 and older. Drinking becomes a big part of socializing, becomes a big part of meeting people. And so now that I'm not Christian anymore, I can drink now. And so this is freedom, right? But then, what Jesus says is that to sin is to enslave yourself to sin. So this is what we have to keep straight in our minds. This is what we have to really think about. Because the thing about sin, the thing about is not not following after Jesus is that there's this kind of mindset, there's this kind of, I guess, even, you could call it a philosophy or a power, but there's this mindset that if I'm not Christian, then I am free. There's this mindset that I am free to sin now, and that sin is something desirable. Sin is something that's good. And so if you hear, there's that metaphor, right, of the forbidden fruit. And so the reason why they call it a forbidden fruit is because people want it. It's because they desire it. They say, I want that thing, even though I know I shouldn't. So this is how people treat sin. This is how people treat, I guess, the commandments of God. They see sin as something that they shouldn't do, but then secretly they want it. And so this is why it seems like when we sin, it seems like that is freeing. It seems like when I sin, then that means I'm just letting myself go. I'm letting myself be who I am. This is the words that people use. But then, what they're not understanding, what they're not seeing here, is that even though sin might be desirable, even though it might feel good, that sin is actually enslaving you. That sin is actually trapping you inside of it. And so, then the opposite is true, right? Being a Christian, serving God, following His commandments, this is true freedom. This is how we can be free. And so, this doesn't make sense to people. It doesn't click with people. They say, you say you're free, but then you serve at church every single day. You say you're free, but then you're always making time to read your Bible. You're always making time to pray. You don't go drink with anyone. You don't go party with anyone. And when you're with the group of friends, they can't do what they want to do because you're there. And so they think, how are you free? What are you talking about? The thing is that this is a perspective that changes when we come to know who Christ is. This is something that changes when we understand how good Christ is. Because one of the reasons why we think that sin is desirable, we think that sin is what I secretly want, is because we don't know Christ yet. It's because we don't know how good He is. The thing about sin is that sin is, C.S. Lewis says this, but sin, all it is the perversion of a natural desire. So you have a natural desire like sex, and then sin takes sex one step further, it turns it into lust. And so this is how sin works. Because a lot of people view Christianity as being like down on fun, right? It's like you can't do anything. But then the thing is that God made pleasures. He's the one that makes food taste good. He's the one that makes interacting with people feel good. So God is the one who invented these pleasures. But then what happens is that what sin does, it takes those pleasures and it twists them. And so because of that, we desire it, but then it's sin now. But then what we find in Jesus, what we find when we're in Jesus, is the natural pleasure that we're missing. Though we were desiring after these twisted pleasures, after this sin, in Jesus we find the true pleasures. In Jesus we find true joy, true love. And so it's in Jesus that we find these things. So the thing is that we have to get our mindsets turned around. We have to change how we're thinking. If we keep thinking like the rest of the world thinks, if we keep thinking that Christianity is down on fun, it's down on pleasure, if we keep thinking like this, then we're not understanding what Jesus is offering us. Christianity, it's not something that chains you. It's not something that holds you back. It's not like I can't go somewhere on Sunday because I have to go to church. It's not like that. But it's I want to go to church. It's I want to know who Christ is more because He really is good. So, this is the mindset that we have to have. And what Jesus says about this is that if you not only believe in Him, but if you abide in Him, if you abide in His Word, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And so, this is something that I always emphasize, right? That it's not only about believing in Jesus, like saying, I believe in Jesus, I confess Him as Lord. But now, once you have said that, once you confess Him as Lord, then you need to abide in Him. You need to live a life following after Him. And So it's not just this one moment, one phrase kind of thing, but it's a lifetime that you have to dedicate. It's a lifetime that you have to believe in Him, abide in Him. And so it's this abiding that really sets you apart as a Christian. Because there's so many people who just say, I believe in Jesus, but then you look at their lives and you can't tell the difference between them and anybody else. Like it's not even that they go to church every Sunday. Sometimes they go to church if they want to, because there's friends at church. But then they just say this, but then if you look at their lives, what is different? When you talk to them, when you listen to them, how do they show Christ? Is this in their lives? So, it's not only about this believing, this confession just one time, but it's about this abiding, this continual life with Jesus. And it's in this life that we can be free from sin. Because over here, if it was just a one-time thing, then you don't believe you are free from sin. You believe that, like many other people do, you believe that I can't help but to sin. Sin is something I secretly desire, but then I try not to do. If you're living just with Jesus, just like one moment at a time, it's like one moment, or even if it's just like a Sunday thing, like you come to Sunday, you come to service, and then that's how you show your faith. If it's just this one moment kind of thing, then of course sin is going to seem so powerful for you. Of course it's going to seem so desirable for you, because you're not abiding. You're not with Jesus every day in every moment. So it's in this abiding, this is where we can truly find Christ. This is where we begin to have confidence in our faith. We begin to really understand what it means to be a Christian. So if we abide, we begin to learn the truth. Now what is the truth? I mean, there's a lot of things that we could say the truth is, but the truth here, the truth for this, is that sin is not actually that fun. Sin is not actually that desirable. But Christ, He's really the only one I need. We sing all these worship songs about Christ. Like we started today's worship service with "Give Me Jesus," right? And we ended with "I'd rather have Jesus than anything else in this world." But is this really true? Do we really know this? Would I really have Jesus than winning the lottery? What if the lottery was like $10 billion? Would I rather have Jesus? So, but I would rather have Jesus because He actually is more valuable than that. He actually is greater than all these things. So we learn that sin doesn't satisfy. We learn that sin always falls short. So we keep seeking after the next best thing, right? Just like buying an iPhone, right? Like, I remember when the iPhone actually came out. It's like iPhone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's like you have to keep buying the new thing. So because of that, there's actually a huge problem with pollution and stuff because they keep releasing new models. But then people keep buying, and they keep buying, and they keep buying. It's because they're searching for something that they think will satisfy them. And it does satisfy for a little bit, right? It does seem like, oh, if I have that next new thing, then my problems with the old thing will go away. But we find problems with the new thing again. And so there's this kind of cycle that repeats with the world. And this is the cycle that also repeats with sin, is that I can never be satisfied by sin. So that's why people go on binges, right? And that's why people, they call it getting stuck in a rut. And so what people do is that, like, usually most of the time they're just a normal person, right? They're okay. But then all of a sudden, they go on a binge. And so a lot of times it's drinking, so they'll drink until they pass out, and then they'll keep drinking after that. And other times it's sex. So people, they just kind of go crazy with that too. And then after a while, they find that, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, and then they come back, and they're their normal selves again. And what happens is that they keep falling into this cycle. And what they're not realizing is that that's not that desirable. What they're not realizing is that this is an illusion that can never satisfy me. Because that's what it is, it's an illusion. You think that I'm going to be satisfied by this. You think that this is what will give me meaning. But then you try it, you do it, and you find out I'm empty again. So, this is the truth. The truth is that sin is not that desirable. And the truth is that Jesus is very desirable, that he's very good to know. So knowing this truth is what sets us free from sin. It's what makes us free from doing the things that are displeasing to God. So he says that everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not remain in the house forever, but the son remains forever. And what this means is that, I guess, if we're thinking about an ancient household, right? A slave, eventually they're going to leave the house. Either they die, or they get sold again, or they become free. But then the son will stay in that household forever. And so if the son, Jesus Christ, sets you free, then he says, you are free indeed. And so, I guess the main thing that I'm trying to say to you guys today is that we have to change how we're thinking about sin. We have to change how we're thinking about Jesus. And so, what is the reason that we come to church? What is the reason that we call ourselves Christian? Is this just something that we do because our parents make us come? Is this just something that we do because, I don't know, my friends are at church, or this is the culturally right thing to do? Or am I Christian because I know who Jesus is? Am I Christian because I know how good Jesus is? That he really is good to me. That he really can give me everything that I need. Even though I may not have a house, even though I may live in a trailer, even though I don't have any money, I still know that I have everything that I need because of Christ. This is the mindset that we have to change. Because what happens in a church, if we don't know Jesus, if we don't know who God is, then church ends up becoming a place where we have to keep people. Like, we have to have the best music, we have to have the best preaching, and then we have to have fun people to be around. And so this is how a lot of churches keep people in their church. But that's not what church should be about. The church is not primarily about our relationships with each other, even though that is important. But first, our relationship needs to be grounded in our personal relationships with Christ. If there isn't this relationship with Christ first, then all we really are is just a club. All we really are is just a group of people meeting together. Maybe it's because of tradition or whatever, but still, without this actual relationship with Christ, we don't have anything. So, knowing Christ and knowing who he is, this isn't something that is difficult. I also don't want you guys to misunderstand this. Like, people usually think of as people who know Christ, or Christians who are really dedicated. They usually think of these people as like super Christians, right? Or they're like spiritual giants. But then knowing Christ is not something that's difficult. It's not something that we have to really strive for. And this is because Christ wants to know us. This is because God is the one who loves us first. And so all we have to do to know him, to love him back, is simply to abide with him. That's all that it takes. And so, if we just abide with him, if we just walk with him day by day, moment by moment, then you slowly begin to know who Christ is. And this isn't like some giant spiritual revelation where like you get a picture of Jesus just pops into your head and then you just know everything about Jesus at that moment. But coming to know Jesus is like me coming to know you. It takes time. We have to live together, we have to walk together, talk together. And slowly but surely we begin to come to know who that other person is. It's the same with Jesus. How much time are you spending with Jesus? How much time are you taking to walk with him? Because just Sunday isn't enough. I mean, if you look at school, let's say that there's one person in one period of school. And so that person, you only see them once a week. How well can you get to know that person? Or even if there's somebody that's in every one of your classes, but you guys never meet outside of class, how well can you get to know that person? So if all we know of Jesus is what we have on Sunday, is this hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or however much time you spend here, that's all the time that you have in a week, then how much do you really think you can know Jesus? Can you really even say that you love Jesus if you don't know him? So it's about this continual walking with Him. The thing is that the more you walk with Him, the more you'll get to know Him. The less you walk with Him, the less you'll get to know Him. It's that simple. So, getting to know Him, it seems like a chore at first. It's because we start off from the mindset that sin is desirable. We start off from the mindset that, in a way, church is boring. This is the mindset that we start off with. And so this is a mindset that we have to break at first. It's like breaking a habit. But then once we've broken this, and once we walk more with Jesus, then we understand that He really is good. And so it's no longer me just pushing myself away from these things, but now it's Christ pulling me towards Him. And so it's no longer just me just striving not to do these bad things, not to sin, not to be a bad Christian, but now I'm going after Christ, not because I'm afraid of these things, but because I want to know who He is. And so this is also the mindset that people have behind like Judgment Day, right? Or the eschaton, or the last days. So when we all stand before God, what is your motivation? And so when we think about the final day, when we stand before God, if it's like, say, if we were going to die tomorrow, then what motivates us to get right before God? Is it because we fear the wrong that we've done? Or is it us loving God, knowing God more? Because a lot of times you have all these doomsday stuff. It's like, repent, like the kingdom of heaven is near, you're going to go to hell, kind of thing. But then that's not the real motivation that really drives us. That motivation, it doesn't keep people as Christians. This kind of motivation actually pushes people away from the church. It pushes people away from evangelists. The motivation that calls us is that I'm longing for that day. I want that day to come, because when that day comes, I will see Him face to face. I will finally see Him face to face and know Him for who He is. And this is the motivation that drives us. This is the motivation that keeps us. This is what hope is. This is what real hope is, the Christian hope. We're not following after God because we fear that He's going to put us in hell, even though He does have that power. But we follow after God because we love Him. So, this is the mindset that we have to change. So, this is something that we have to do daily. And so it becomes a daily practice, a daily discipline. And the thing is that with disciplines and with growing spiritually, like with growing in anything else, let's say you do a sport, let's say you want to play music, let's say you want to work out, get healthy, or get buff, or whatever. The thing is that you have to have discipline. It's not fun all the time. Like sometimes when you're working out, because I have to work out because my health kind of sucks. So I don't want to do this all the time. I don't want to do it most of the time, but I still have to do it because I know this is good for me. So that's kind of the spirit of a discipline. So to grow in anything in this life takes discipline. If you want to succeed in a certain field, you have to have discipline. You have to study, you have to work, you have to gain experience in that field if you want to succeed. If you just live your life just kind of floating by, just kind of, you get whatever you get and you're just satisfied with that, like, oh, whatever, that's okay, that's how you live, then you're never going to get anywhere. And it's the same with our spiritual lives. If we're not going to have this discipline in our lives to follow Christ, then we're not going to get anywhere. What happens then is that our spiritual lives, they end up burning out. We end up getting bored. And then we end up not knowing who Christ is anymore. So, to know Christ is simple, once again. To know Christ is just to abide with Him in every day. That's all it takes. And if this seems like a lot, then I guess it's going to be harder for you. But if we have this mindset that knowing Him is worth it, knowing Him is really worth giving up all that I have for. If this is the mindset that we bring to this, then it becomes easy. And it becomes even something that we want to do. And then when this becomes something we want to do, then it's almost like it's not a discipline anymore. Like my brother, he's a person who really likes working out. So he works out every single day. And this is just something that is just kind of a big part of his life. But because he likes it, it's almost like it's not a discipline. It's just something that he does naturally, something that he wants to do. If he doesn't do it, then he feels wrong. So this is what our spiritual lives can become. This sounds so weird to say, right? But it can become like, I'm longing for my time of prayer. It can become, I'm longing to read the Bible. So this might sound really weird, right? But then this is because this is the place that we're in then. This is where we're coming from. But this is what is waiting for us. And so knowing Christ, this is a road that will always satisfy. Like everything in the world, like you can study all you want. And then I was able to become valedictorian in my high school. But then you know what it takes to become valedictorian? You just take all AP classes, participate in everything you can, and then you just keep doing this day after day after day for 4 years. And then you get that title, it gets you into a good college, and then everything that you did in high school doesn't matter anymore. And then same for college, like you do good, you get your grades, and then you get your degree. And then everything you do in college doesn't matter anymore. And then for a job, you just work and work and work, make money, work and make money. Then this is just kind of how people live. And so, what I thought at that time was, then what's the point? What am I building? I'm not building anything. I'm just building up for that graduation day. You give a speech, you get recognized, and then that's it. So, the thing is that if we build up for Christ, if we build up for Him, then this is something that will never fade away. So Jesus talks about storing up your treasures in heaven, right? Because all the money that you have on earth, it's not worth much. It's not worth anything, actually, especially when you die. Because when you die, you don't take your money with you. It's not what the pharaohs thought. Like, they brought as much gold with them into the pyramids as they could to like take it to the afterlife. But then the gold's still there. So I can't take what I have in this world with me to heaven. But Jesus says, store your treasures in heaven. So if we come to know who Jesus is, if we invest in this relationship with Him, then this is something that will always have value. This is something that will always gain value. So, just in this week, just as with every week, what will you do now? So you've heard this, you've heard me explain it. This isn't the first time I've said this either. This is something that I always say. But you've heard it again, and now what will you do? Will you now take your time to abide with Christ? Will you begin to break your old habits, break what you used to do, and now spend that time with Christ, and start getting to know Christ? Or will you just live like you always do? And I'm not here to guilt trip you. I'm not here to like look at your life and then measure how much time you spend praying or beholding God or whatever, and then like criticizing you like, oh, you're not doing enough, like, oh, why'd you miss Monday? You shouldn't have missed Monday. I'm not gonna do that. It's up to you. So, what are you gonna do with your time? So I'm here, and one of my roles here is to always just remind you of this thing. To remind you of what's really good. To remind you of what's really true. It's up to you whether you want to follow or not. I mean, it might not be up to you whether you're here physically. For kids, parents force kids to come. That's how it is. Unless there's something fun that the kids want to do there. But knowing Jesus is not something that can be forced. Knowing Jesus is not something that I can make you do by my words or by my actions. I can just show you my own life. I can just show you with my words. But it's really up to you. So today, will you decide, once again, for a new week to follow after Jesus? Or will you just live life like you always used to? So, I'm just reminding you once again, knowing Jesus is better. Really knowing Christ, it changes everything about your life. And it makes it so that, like, for worship, like, people always want to have the newest songs, right? They want to have the best bands, the best music, the best lyrics. So they're always pushing out new songs in the worship industry. But when you get to know Jesus, you can sing Amazing Grace for the rest of your life. And that song, it never loses meaning for you. It never loses its power for you. So in this week, we have to, once again, decide what we will do. So let's pray. Dear Lord, I just pray for these people, and I pray for myself as well, that we would give you a chance. That we wouldn't just live just kind of knowing you. That we wouldn't just live just coming to church, just going through the motions, but that we would really strive to know who you are personally. Begin to know that you are good, that you are all that we need, Lord. Just pray that you would remind us throughout this whole week of what it means to abide in you, what it means to follow after you in every moment.